Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of Mercy Walks with Migrants. My name is Mike Poulin, and I'm a member of the Mercy Justice team. We're doing something a little different today. If you have watched some of our previous episodes, you may recall sisters talking about people they collaborate with to do their immigration ministry. So to show just how important that kind of collaboration is, today my sister guests are joined by two of the people with whom they collaborate to serve migrants. And as you'll be able to see, we have a whole crew with us here today. So let's get started. The sisters joining me today are Sister Judy Carle and Sister Joan Marie O'Donnell. And we're also being joined by Reverend Penny Nixon and Reverend Deborah Lee. So first, let me introduce our sisters. Sister Joan Marie entered the Sisters of Mercy 64 years ago. Her ministry has been primarily in education and pastoral ministry. She currently resides in the Mercy community in Burlingame, California. 6 years ago, Sister Joan Marie retired from spiritual care ministry in an assisted living and memory care community, and she currently serves on the board of Mercy High School in Burlingame. She also collaborates with other religious groups and organizations who share the Mercy critical concern for immigrants, including the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort and the InterFaith Movement for Human Integrity. Also from Burlingame is Sister Judy Carle. She's served in education, community leadership, formation work in her community, ministry with Mercy Housing, and the development of a new institute of the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. She's also been involved with Mercy-affiliated ministries, including Nuns and Nuns, Mercy Volunteer Corps in San Francisco, Catherine Center Residential Program for Formerly Incarcerated Women, the Healing Well, and she has served on the board of Dignity Health. Additionally, as a member of the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, Sister Judy broadens and deepens her empathy as she accompanies and advocates for immigrants seeking asylum. So hello, sisters, and welcome. How are you today?
Good. Thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to our sisters, I want to welcome Penny Nixon, who joins us from the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, and Deborah Lee, who is here from the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. Reverend Deborah Lee became the executive director of the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity in 2018. Prior to becoming executive director, she served as the program director for the organization since 2009. And in that role, Reverend Lee built up the immigration justice program, engaging dozens of congregations in Northern California to become sanctuary congregations and to respond to the wave of migrant and youth families and the detention and deportation crises. Her work has been recognized with awards from the United Nations Association of the East Bay, the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy, and the National United Church of Christ Justice and Witness Ministry. Reverend Lee has worked at the intersection of faith and social justice for over 25 years in popular education, community organizing, and advocacy connecting issues of race, gender, economic justice, anti-militarism, LGBTQ inclusion, and immigrant rights. She has consistently sought to strengthen the voice and role of faith communities in today's social movements. She's the daughter of immigrants and part of the Chinese diaspora that has taken her family throughout Southeast Asia, Mexico, and now the United States. Welcome, Reverend Deb.
Thank you.
And Reverend Penny Nixon served as the senior ministry of the Congregational Church of San Mateo from 2007 to 2022, and was honored with the title of Minister Emerita upon her retirement from pastoral ministry. She was the first woman to hold that position, and with her leadership, the church thrived as a vibrant, progressive spiritual community, became known for its work in social justice, received the MLK Award from the County of San Mateo, and became a sanctuary church. She also served as a pastor of an LGBTQ church in San Francisco for 12 years. A community leader and political activist, Penny has received numerous awards and recognitions for her work in both San Francisco and San Mateo, the most recent being named 2019 Woman of the Year for Assembly District 22. She is the founder and co-director of the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, a group of 40 interfaith clergy engaged in addressing the most pressing social needs in San Mateo County. Currently, Reverend Penny works as the faith director with the Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo and as the faith community's housing liaison for the County of San Mateo. Welcome to you as well, Penny.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Wow, there's a lot here in all of your your backgrounds and your experience. So I'm glad that we get to talk to you for a short time today. I want to start with a question to our two sisters to kind of give us some context here. So Sister Judy and Sister Joan Marie, why was it important for you to do this interview with Penny and Deborah along with us?
I felt the personal need as a Sister of Mercy to widen my own tent and to collaborate more widely with others who share our critical concerns, especially around immigration. And I think that linking our voices to the voices of other faiths and like-minded organizations really increases our power to be heard and to make a difference in our world. At a recent meeting in St. Louis, our Institute of the Sisters of Mercy in the Americas recommitted ourselves to intensify our work in communion with others who seek a more just and inclusive world. And I think that is what we're doing. And I always hearken back to our Constitution, the kind of rule of life that we live by, which has a line that says, by collaborating with others in works of mercy, we learn from them how to be more merciful. And that has been my deepest experience of working with these organizations and the people in them and the people that they serve.
I would.
How about you, Sister Judy?
I would add to Joan's comment about widening our tent. In contrast, when we started, we declared public sanctuary in 1986. We did this as a community. We involved the entire community for a year previous, and we had an 83% positive vote. It was very dangerous at that time to harbor undocumented people, or illegal aliens as they were called, and also even to drive them. So we were kind of out there on our own. We housed immigrant families until 1992. And then we've had the support of Mercy Justice and also our monthly calls. However, when we joined the InterFaith movement for human integrity, our tent widened and we found colleagues of like mind and also people of different faiths, bringing different talents, different interests, and the collaboration was a very strengthening thing for us. So that has changed our activity. And, 40 years later, we're in a different spot as a community. And we need to work together with those who are like-minded and those who are advocating for migrants.
Thank you both. Kind of in a similar direction, I'm going to bring back Reverend Penny and Reverend Deb and ask you, how does the involvement of Sisters of Mercy further the work that your organizations are doing?
Go ahead, Deb.
The Sisters of Mercy add so much to our collaboration, and we are so appreciative. One, I think, has been mentioned, sort of their depth of history of working with immigrants over generations, bringing an intergenerational aspect, bringing a kind of a radical Catholic aspect into the mix as well, with other interfaith partners has been really valuable. And I think that the deepest thing is like the spiritual practice, really the spiritual practice that's so engaged with action, so willing to be out there on the street and willing to be active, but also the deep sense of grounding and reflection that we've often asked them to help us lead.
Thanks. Anything you'd like to add to that, Reverend Penny?
Sure. I think that, we work primarily with Joan, so I'll just speak to that, and just the broadening and really our link to the greater Catholic community has been really important. And also just I think what Deb said, the grounding in deep spirituality. I think that, I would speak on behalf of our whole cohort that, whenever we're with Joan, we feel lifted up. And this presence of Christ in always showing up. Like if Joan can be there, she will be there. And, that ministry of presence is so important. She's a deep listener, and I think bringing that to the cohort and to the interfaith work we do has been a profound example for all of us. And I would call Joan like our elder stateswoman at the cohort. And people really look up to her, and just her longevity of service and her resilience and her faithfulness have been just a sterling example of what it means as a person of faith to show up to those who need accompaniment, who long for it, and it changes us as much as it hopefully begins to make a change in the systems that can be so oppressive. And so having Sister Joan with us is just, it's just an uplift every time. And it does, I think, you know, Deb said it so well, helps keep us grounded. And there's just, I found with Sister Joan a sense of joy in service that is a reminder, right? Because it's easy to get so angry at oppressive systems and come from that place of resistance all the time, and that's necessary. But Joan also brings just this sense of joy and deep love for people, and that's been a great value to our cohort.
Can I add one more thing, Mike? I think also the sense them being connected to this national and international body of sisters is really powerful. I remember when we were doing looking at the root causes of migration and being able to connect with Jean Stoken, for example, who was also with us in Honduras, but knowing that we were connecting to various Sisters of Mercy across the country. You know, Sister Judy was with us on a call with the governor's office last week. So being able for her to be able to represent the Sisters of Mercy, you know, of the Midwest, and be able to speak from that position of this larger congregation as we're gathering with other kinds of interfaith bodies is really powerful, to be able to show that that they can communicate some of the issues that we're raising and the values and the concerns to a much wider audience.
Well, thank you both all four of you for helping kind of set the stage for this conversation. And thank you, Deb and Penny, for loving our sisters as much as we love them, because it's fun to hear that from groups who are working with them in different ways. I'm going to focus this next question initially towards Sister Joan Marie and Reverend Penny and your work with Peninsula MultiFaith Cohort. But if you would tell us about one of your current or recent efforts, Penny and Joan, on behalf of immigrants. What's something that you have worked on recently together?
I'm going to let Penny start out on that, and then I'll add some of the ones we've done in the cohort. We've been going for 7 years now. We're in our 7th year.
Great, thanks, Joan. Because we've done a lot of different things, and just to set the context a little larger, Mike, we the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort doesn't work on immigration alone. We work really at the intersection of racial justice, housing, police reform, immigration, juvenile justice, right? Which all intersect and all, you know, have such deep relationships and connection to immigration. So just so you know, I think one of the things that we do a lot of advocacy, and I think Joan will bring that up. But I think one of the things that has been done recently, it was during the pandemic, and my church at that time was located in North Central, which is a primarily immigrant community, and the people in that community were the most deeply affected, essential workers laid off immediately, and many of them living in multi-generational homes and apartments. And I can't remember exactly how it happened, but Joan said there's some food and whatever. And before we knew it, Joan was getting food through Sisters of Mercy that then we could hand out in the neighborhood, and connected us with the people that they get the food from. So then we were able to get our own status and then have food delivered, and it was all due to Joan. And so we went over to the Sisters of Mercy in a pickup truck, and Joan was directing everybody, and we loaded up the truck and fed the community. And Go ahead, Joan.
And this was kind of a clandestine operation during a very, very strict COVID rules. And I have to say, our food services that we have in Burlingame, they were so excited to be a part of this. So it's our tent widens and widens.
Yeah, we put black on and the beanies on and stuck around. No,
but it's okay to talk about it now, right?
We can talk about it now, right?
You can ask forgiveness now rather than permission.
Right,
so.
Exactly.
But that's just one of many examples of just Joan, seeing a need, meeting a need, collaborating, and we'll never know the difference it made in so many lives during that time.
We're working, and Penny will add to this, on California State Senate Bill SB 4, which would allow churches and religious institutions to build 100% affordable housing on underutilized property they own, and speed up the process for doing this by cutting through some of the red tape to get to this goal. And we're working on it really hard to get it passed, and we think it's going to go through. And this would give our churches this opportunity to do this and to collaborate with some of the developers, our faith-based developers, to build new housing for folks. And this affects, our people of color, our immigrants.
Oh, that's great. Those are some big deals, the providing of food and the affordable housing, which is an issue really across the country, but I know so much so in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also, I want to lift up one other thing that Joan really collaborated on, and that is that we partner deeply with Faith in Action in the Bay Area and really take our lead from the people most impacted. And another thing that we worked on earlier on was getting some money from the county for deportation defense fund. And really, the cohort showed up. Joan was one of the speakers, and right then and there, the county supervisor committed to this big chunk of money that they've been lobbying for all along. Yeah. And I don't. There's a gentle authority with which Joan speaks that really moves people. And I saw it just in action back in May when we had a faith summit on ending homelessness, and which was Joan's idea. And so
but she carried it out.
It was Joan's idea, and she spoke. As Joan was speaking, I said to the county executive, I said, "That's Joan," and she's like 81. And he was like, "She is awesome." Like, he was so captivated. But yeah, again, a beautiful ripple effect, and, working on, eviction moratoriums, which particularly impact immigrants, and just cause evictions and so on.
Right. Another thing we did is we attended a lot of Truth Act forums to pressure the sheriff to stop cooperating, with ICE and stop transfers to detention. And this has been quite successful, including getting our last sheriff out of office, voting him out of office, and voting the first Hispanic woman in California to be the sheriff, and who is very much, I guess you'd say, on our side. And now ourselves, in collaboration with Fix and San Mateo, trying to get a permanent ordinance in so that this doesn't happen. These transfers don't happen.
Well, thanks for these examples of the great work that you're doing. Let's transition over to Reverend Deb and Sister Judy and hear a little bit about what the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity is doing around efforts on behalf of immigrants and the other work that you do as well.
Well, I think that was such a great example of the ways that the Sisters of Mercy are working really locally and impacting policies at the local level, which are so important for people's day-to-day life and day-to-day issues. The ways that we've worked with the Sisters of Mercy most recently have been really about how are we building the faith voice across the state and looking at some statewide bills and national legislation, statewide and national policy towards immigrants, both asylum seekers coming through the border, that they not be detained, that they be treated with respect and dignity, that they have human rights, as well as our detention and deportation policies. So our work with Sisters of Mercy goes back probably a decade, where we've been working together to really change national policy that criminalizes immigration, that criminalizes the process of migration itself. And that happens through deportations. It happens through the detentions, 198 detention centers across the country. 30,000 people on any given day are being deprived of their liberty because of their migration status, being held in immigration detention facilities. So I've been involved in many vigils over the years to actually close down the detention center here locally. And that did happen in 2018 after 7 years of vigils. And we're now extending that campaign, and Sister Judy's and Sister Joan's been part of a statewide pilgrimage actually to close down all the detention centers in California. We're halfway there. So there used to be 12 and there are now 6. And Sister Judy and so many other ways have accompanied dozens of people to court who are facing deportation to protect them against deportation, to accompany people as they got out of detention, and to support new arrivals as they try to begin their life anew.
I'm grateful to Deb for giving the overview of what we've been involved in, all kinds of appearances at court, vigils outside the ICE headquarters in San Francisco. And what Joan and I have also been doing is trying to involve our sisters. We've given talks to especially our retired community, and showed them ways that they could be involved. They've written letters, they've signed postcards, they've called their representatives. We've even gone through how you call a representative. Here are your lines, so that they wouldn't be afraid to do it. And we've also worked with, we share our campus with Mercy High School. And we've had some contacts with the students at Mercy, both joining them for their sessions on the critical concern of immigration. And also when we had Mercy volunteers, we did sessions with our Mercy volunteers and also invited them to some of the vigils. So it's become kind of a down-home experience for our sisters on the Burlingame campus. And then we do send out missives to the larger former Burlingame community with regard to immigration notices.
I think most recently, we had a solidarity hunger strike, a hunger fast. We had a solidarity fast, and you involved students at the high school and also the your residential community to participate in a day of fasting and solidarity with hunger strikers in immigration detention, people who've been detained, who are detained, protesting against the abusive conditions, lack of sanitary water, and indefinite detention, who had been on hunger strike for several weeks.
Thanks, Reverend Deb and Judy, for those examples. Let me follow up with the both of you with another question. So as we talk about mercy issues with our communities, folks who are familiar with the Sisters of Mercy are familiar with our critical concerns and our concern for immigration and other issues. But maybe Reverend Deb could tell me a little bit about why is it that the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, and you as well, why are migration issues important to you and your organization? Why is this something that that you see the need for change around, and why do you work for that?
Yeah, well, I think our slogan as an organization is that every person is sacred across bars and borders, and we are looking to change the ways that people of color are criminalized in the United States. And the two main systems in which people of color are criminalized are through the criminal legal system and the migration system. And we look at the hundreds of jails, prisons, and detention centers across the country as a primary way in which people's divine dignity is really robbed from them and harm is perpetuated. And so we believe it's important as people of faith to stand with, to be present with, to recognize the dignity and holiness of people, even, despite the country they were born in and despite their worst mistake. And so if people of faith cannot stand with and recognize that, then we're in big trouble. And so our call really is for people of faith to model that and to witness that and to still recognize the dignity of every person. So that's why it's really important. And I think many people are unaware in the United States of the ways communities of color are institutionally criminalized. So it's really important to unveil that and for people to see the truth of the ways that their systems are structurally harming particular communities and in ways that many of us are complicit with on a day-to-day basis.
I really appreciate, Reverend Deb, that you naming that as a faith connection and also as a kind of a congregational call, an individual call. I think sometimes people see the sisters as always being in service. They don't necessarily always relate that to their own faith call and their own faith community's call. So to hear that, I think from you is really important. So thank you. Sister Judy, is there anything you want to add to that on this topic of why we do this with Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity?
Well, I would refer back to our chapter of 2005 when we chose immigration as one of our critical concerns. And at that particular time, we saw this as an urgent duty to stand in solidarity with immigrants. And for the fullness of life, actually, is how we expressed it. And that was 2005. Almost 20 years later, we are still finding ways to accompany those who are seeking asylum in our country. And as I said, the interfaith movement just broadens our capacity to walk with immigrants. We can't necessarily take people into sanctuary, but other faith groups can. We can accompany, we can advocate, we get very involved with individuals who are detained after maybe serving their sentence and then are in danger of deportation. So what's interesting is we're working on the broad issues. We're also knowing each individual and their families as they come up to be heard in hearings or to handle their legal cases.
Thank you. So I'm going to bring our other guests back and kind of ask the similar question to Sister Joan Marie and Reverend Penny. You talked a few minutes ago about feeding the hungry, acting on their behalf. Reverend Penny, what is there something you'd like to say around that question about why you and your community organization are involved in this work? Why is it important to you?
Sure, Mike. I think, what Judy and Rev Deb said already, it's just absolutely at the heart of, how we approach this. And I think what is important and the dignity and ultimate worth of every human being. In our sacred texts, migration is just throughout. Jesus himself was a refugee. And, I really believe deeply that God sees no borders. And as people of faith, we are called to be part of the kingdom of God, that we are all related, that we are all interconnected. We're called to be world citizens. And I think for me also kind of standing against this rampant Christian nationalism that, is so pervasive in our country. And I believe fuels much of our anti-immigrant policies. Standing against that as people of faith and saying, hey, that is actually against the very essence of Christianity, the heart of Christ, and all that we stand for. And we are in this together. And I think Sister Joan will remember this. We did a huge press conference, and it was particularly when, there was all this family separation at the border. And I know that that's still going on. And also when, they were doing a lot of raids and stuff. And it's like no document defines anyone's humanity. And that was kind of our mantra at the press conference. So I think for myself, and I know for Joan, it is our deep faith that fuels the work that we do in seeing every person as equal and interconnected. And we are all part of one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, too many people, and they're mainly people of color, are dehumanized and subjected to a kind of violence that makes my heart sick. I think the violence in our world is the one that comes up for me. And I was put in touch with this on many occasions, but one of them was the experience, and it was with the InterFaith movement for human integrity, when 40 of us went on a pilgrimage for a better future. And it was a bus trip to visit all 10 detention centers in California and to pray and advocate for closure. On the bus we went on were former detainees. And at each of the detention centers, it was men who gave witness to their experience in detention, the inhumanity of it. And I even as I speak of it right now, it brings tears to my eyes. And I think the stories that we've heard, and I think we could all, vouch for this, the personal stories of people who have been affected, who have been disrespected and dehumanized, is such a motivation to do something. And our world is just so in need of compassion and mercy. And I feel we need to bring it in any way that we can.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew, maybe I'll have you bring everybody back for our this last question that I have set up for us. And I want to kind of keep in mind that we have a national audience. So while many folks who watch might not be able to join you in activities in the Bay Area, is there one important thing that you think people can do to aid immigrants? Any advice that you can give for folks who are listening to this saying, okay, what do I do to help people who are migrating, to help people who are in need, help people of color who are being treated unjustly? Any thoughts on that? Maybe we'll start with Reverend Penny and kind of work our way down the screen here.
What came to mind is that anybody, anywhere, can take the time to listen to stories, to see people, to hear people, and to believe people. And any person of faith or any person in touch with their own humanity, if you deeply listen and you care, then you can't say you don't know. So if you're aware, then you have a responsibility to act. And I believe that begins with listening to people's stories and believing them.
Sister Joan, what are your thoughts on that? Any advice that you have for our watchers today?
Well, you mentioned that not everybody can be out there necessarily on the front line, marching or rallying or participating in a press conference. But as Judy was mentioning when she talked about the involvement of our Sisters in Mercy, particularly locally, I think any of us could take time out to call our legislators, to write to our representatives, and to support the initiatives and the legislation. Become educated. First of all of us need ongoing education. And I'd say if you can't be present, pray for those working to create change and for immigrants as well.
Reverend Deb, do you have an idea you'd like to share with our audience?
That's a great list already. I think that, a lot of this is around narrative and the way people see migrants. And I think we all can play a role, no matter where we are, in interrupting racist and anti-immigrant thought and speaking up and speaking out when that happens. And I think that's really important. An election year is coming, and we know that all those things are going to be thrown into thrown into the discourse again. And it's really painful and really harmful. And so interrupting that and figuring out like what are ways that you can accompany or stand with communities and what kind of support do they need, and asking them is really important. I will add one more thing too, I think on a national front, is that anything you can do to challenge the idea that immigration detention is, should exist. It should not exist. Immigration detention shouldn't exist. There's no reason why it needs to exist.
Mhm.
It didn't used to exist more than 30 years ago. It's become normalized, and it's a huge money-making industry. And the thought that people are migrating for months and months through all kinds of harsh conditions, and then they're going to get thrown into an immigration detention center and need thousands of dollars in order to leave, and in the name of a US citizen who will like write their name on a piece of paper. It's ridiculous. And so I think I would like everyone across the country to really challenge the idea that immigration detention has a right to exist. It doesn't. And people have a right to migrate and to be human. And we have many other creative ways that we can support people through their migration proceedings without having to detain them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Sister Judy, you get the last word on this.
Well, there's so many good suggestions, so I'm going to add that the background to all of this is to study the history of why so many people are forced to come from their countries.
Right.
I find that people don't understand, why can't they just stay where they are? What's the problem of them coming here? Why do they all need to come here? So also become especially familiar with what's happening at the U.S.-Mexico border. And as the interest and the information is heightened, I think then we're naturally driven to prayer. And that's something that we try to keep up with our community, is notifying them when there are issues that need prayer and attention right here, right now.
Wow, what a great list of ideas for people, ways for people to be involved. Thanks for sharing the stories of all of the work that you are doing, both individually and together and with your coalitions. I want to thank you, Reverend Deborah and Reverend Penny, for joining us in this space, and for Sister Judy and Sister Joan Marie for providing the community that gives us a chance to talk about these issues and to really connect with a national, international organization that reaches out on issues like immigration. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
I also want to say thank you to Andrew, who's doing our behind the scenes work as always. We appreciate your technical expertise. And I want to say that if you've heard things that inspires you today to walk with migrants, we ask you to please join the Sisters of Mercy in advocacy on behalf of migrants. There'll be an address up on the bottom of the screen where you can sign up to receive action alerts on immigration and other critical issues. And we'll do this again. We have lots more stories to tell about the Mercy community being involved with immigration. So join us again for another episode of Mercy Walks with Migrants in the future. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day and walk with Mercy.